The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
TV party tonight! TV party tonight!
Oh, we got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews.
Don't want to talk about anything else.
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated
To our favorite shows.
Oh, my tickets!
Everybody loves Hypno Toad.
Scary dog!
Pearson at Blurnsville.
Futurama!
Good evening. You are listening to a Radulich and Broadcasting premiere podcast, TV Party Tonight. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight, our favorite show is Star Trek: Strange New Worlds, brought to you by the good people at Secret Hideout, Weed Road Pictures, HMRX Productions, Roddenberry Entertainment, and CBS Studios. And beaming up from his home planet onto the USS Radulich, ladies and gentlemen, it's Lieutenant David Wright himself. How do you do, sir?
What, just a lieutenant?
Get the fuck off my show.
What, I can't be like a lieutenant commander?
Ensign David Wright, how do you do, sir?
Well, I've just been demoted, so not that great.
What's going on, man?
I'm doing good. I'm not in one of the parts of the country where that's on fire right now, so that's good.
I got in my car not that long ago. I was at work, and I work between two different buildings that are a few miles apart. So I drove from one building to the other, did what I needed to do, got back in my car. It was 109 degrees.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I haven't felt 109 degrees since I was in Vegas 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it was hot, damn hot. It's like so hot it should be illegal, David Wright. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, David Wright, last year was the great scheduled purge of 2022, where I became social and too busy to be doing podcasting 4 to 7 days a week.
And we reviewed Halo.
And if there was one missile that hit the ship that sunk it, it was fucking Halo.
Yeah, took a year to recover.
But
the question is, are we doing better or worse than 343 Studios? Ho ho!
In the culling of the schedule, we had to postpone Strange New Worlds. But life has a funny way of writing things. Life finds a way, as we know. And I like David Wright. I like to review things with David Wright, and David Wright and I like to talk science fiction, and I do like my science fiction. So a day late and a dollar short, here we are. Strange New World, Star Trek Season 1. And before we get into the review proper, I really do want to talk to you because, like, you're the Star Trek guy. You did the retrospectives. You did your own little side project here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. Mm-hmm. You did 3 sets of movie retrospectives. You did the Kelvin, you did the TNG, and then you did the Next Generation ones with myself.
The original series, then the Next Generation films, and then we finished up with the Kelvin.
Yes, where Robin and I screamed at each other about the Beastie Boys for an hour. And you're a lifelong Star Trek fan. Let's start there. What brought you to Trek in the first place?
Yeah, it's hard to know the exact moment, but I think it was just, it's cool. Like, you have this cool spaceship, and you have like all these characters going on adventures, strange new worlds, and
did you start with
battles?
Did you start with the original series, or did you start with TNG?
I think I probably started more with TNG, but TOS was still there. I think when I was younger, I found TOS to be a lot more like creepy. Like there are some scary episodes in TOS, like alien monsters killing people, and when you're that young, it's pretty scary. I actually bonded with TOS more over the movies than the TV show.
I was but a lad, and I think I don't think I started even with the show. My dad is who brought me to science fiction. You know, he would give me Heinlein to read and Asimov,
Yep.
and there was always like a popular science magazine lying around or an Omni. So my dad was very science oriented, and you know, through him and through bonding with my father, I was introduced to things that, you know, of a science fiction bent. But I feel like my first touch of Trek was Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. And I maintain to this day Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan is the best Star Trek movie ever. It's damn near perfect.
That's a popular view, and yeah, it's certainly up there.
Oh, you're one of those First Contact guys, aren't you?
No, I wouldn't put First Contact over Wrath of Khan. If I had to pick any Star Trek film to rival Wrath of Khan, it would be Undiscovered Country. Like, that comes pretty close, but
that's the second best in my opinion. I don't think it gets better than Wrath of Khan, but I feel like we've had that debate before.
I am not going to wrestle anyone to the ground who thinks Wrath of Khan is the best Star Trek movie. That is solid choice. Like, it's not something I would debate.
I was a kid the first time I saw Wrath of Khan. I saw it when it came out, and I saw all the Star Trek movies right up through Undiscovered Country, and I'm fairly certain I saw them in the theater. Like Wrath of Khan, I might have seen at home on HBO, or my dad. I think I've told the story of how my dad taped everything off of HBO, and so we just had a mountain of VHS cassettes where, you know, 2 movies a piece on every blank video cassette, and I'm pretty sure that's where I watched it. But Star Trek 3, I'm pretty sure my dad took me to see in the movies. I know we went as a family to see Star Trek 4. Boy, I have come to appreciate Star Trek 4, but I remember seeing it for the first time, and I was like, "What the fuck is with these whales? Why are we doing this?"
Yeah, it's one of those shows where you say the premise of that movie, and it's like, this sounds like the worst idea ever, and you go and see the movie, it's like, oh wow, that was actually pretty good. And I think it is, like, adjusted for inflation, it might be the highest grossing Star Trek movie of them all. Like, it did good.
I made the argument it is the most crowd pleasing. It is the most. It is the most. It has the most resonance with the general audience than any Star Trek movie ever, and that includes anything with the Beastie Boys.
Yeah, but again, to hear more about our thoughts on the original series movies, we did a whole retrospective.
And then I remember going to the theater. I think I might have been going to see like Transformers the movie, and at the time there might have been a poster up for the Final Frontier, and yeah. And I have
there's not much debate on the worst Star Trek movie, that's for sure.
No, that is right at the bottom of the heap. I remember like being really excited. Oh my God, new Star Trek, and what a cool poster this is! And then seeing the movie, and it was like, why does God need a starship? Ugh. Oh, ouch!
Kirk is climbing a mountain. Why is he climbing a mountain?
Yes, yeah. Why is everyone fat? And then yes, Undiscovered Country. They went out with a bang. I was really excited for Generations, and then Generations was what it was, and I was like, yikes.
That was my first Star Trek movie in theaters, was Generations.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah. I remember I was around for when Star Trek 6 came out, but I didn't go to see it in theaters for some reason. But Generations, I thought, I mean, it's fine. You know, it was, yeah.
Of the TNG movies, I think First Contact is the best, but then that's a low bar. Like, and then those next two, Nemesis and Your Mama's Ass,
Insurrection.
That's the one.
Yeah.
I think we decided they were like long episodes of Star Trek. So
Insurrection, definitely.
So I came to the series later. I came to the series after the movies had exhausted themselves. And I would say towards the end of high school, during college, when I was still buying gifts for my parents and what I could afford, my dad's yearly Christmas gift was I would buy him 2 VHS cassettes of TOS episodes. And I would go to Suncoast video store in the Sunrise Mall in Massapequa, Long Island, in case anyone wants to know about my history. And I was always have such fun going through those TOS episodes. Like you said, some of them were creepy. Like, I'll tell you, it was also like a who's who of guest stars. Frank Gorshin, the Riddler. He played, he played Roddy Piper or whatever the hell he was doing with his black and white face. That I got him. One year I bought him Space Seed because I had read up that was the prequel to Wrath of Khan. So I watched a fair amount of TOS with my dad, and it does beg the question: what is the attraction to Star Trek? Why are we doing this? And I'll pitch it to you because you and I talked right before the show started, so you've had a little moment to think about it. What do you think is the general attraction that has made Star Trek a staple of modern American culture?
Well, I think Gene Roddenberry pitched it. His elevator pitch was like wagon train to the stars. It's like Gunsmoke in space. So sort of cowboys out in the frontier, exploring, having adventures. Except it's all in space with spaceships and stuff. And to a degree, it is that.
Yeah.
But I think sort of I don't think this was intentional, but it was at the time. It was a very optimistic view of the future.
Sure.
Like this is a point in history where we're all afraid that we're going to nuke each other.
Yes, or if we're not going to nuke each other, at least the blacks are going to kill the whites, and the whites kill the blacks.
Yeah,
and some of the women were going to kill. And some of the women were going to kill the men if the men didn't kill the women first.
Yeah, though that's been going on since day one of history, but can't say I blame them. But
ow, geez, that's first of all, don't steal my racket. Second of all, yikes, buddy. Are you supposed to be from like happy-go-lucky, love everybody Canada?
Oh yeah, but I'm also I'm married. If anyone here says that women are weak, I'm like, no, they're not. They have to put up with us.
Okay. We'll talk later.
Yeah.
Go.
Anyway, while I keep digging myself into a hole.
I was gonna say, come back next week for divorce.
Yeah. So this was at a part in history where the future was not looking too rosy, and then you had the show that came on and said, you know what? Somehow we make it through all of this, and it turns out pretty good. And I think a lot of people really responded to that, and as Isaac Asimov would put it, like the humanist message that we're able to kind of figure our own stuff out and all come together in this sort of secular science-based society. And I think people really responded to that a lot. And like, it was cool. Like, it's a cool spaceship with cool ray guns and technology and
fun-looking aliens.
Yeah, fun aliens.
I think you also had like a very dynamic human cast. I mean, never mind the fact that you had all the races represented, because some of the lesser races, not so much. Look, we've got a Russian. He mostly sits in the chair and yells something about a phaser.
Like the ensemble cast didn't really hit until like season 3 of Next Generation, whereas the original series was mostly Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and every so often another character would kind of get a bit to do. But for its time, it worked pretty good. And also, I think that there was a lot of variety in the scripts. Like they would actually have for the time, like really prominent science fiction writers write scripts for Star Trek.
That's what I wanted to talk about, because you and I did the 3-season run on Netflix of Lost in Space. And one of the things that we talked about with that show was how this was pure science fiction, because what happens in the world of entertainment is there's cross-pollination, there's a misunderstanding of genre. And so because, and I've said this on another podcast recently, I think there's a lot of thought in Hollywood that your general audience is way dumb and can't handle complex messages or intricate storylines. And, meanwhile, you have a lot of the shows in peak television, that had these massive fan bases. But sure, let's continue to assume our audience is dumb. Yeah. And where I'm going with this is we love science fiction. I think it's the misnomer that it's a niche genre, except that science fiction is one of the most widely loved genres, in the history of entertainment. And what is science fiction but the applicable, believable science to solve problems in a drama? That's science fiction. What Star Trek excelled at, besides the human exchanges between, you had the contrast between your trio. You had the surly McCoy, you had the sexy bravado of Kirk, and then you had the stoic logic of Spock. And they would play off each other. And what fun this was, as they kneaded and goaded and picked at one another. And what came out of that was great fun and drama. But the show itself was not. There was a little bit of action to it, and certainly 60s level TV budget.
Yeah, they had a budget.
Yeah, there was just enough action so that no one could say, "Oh, this is boring," when people had attention spans. But the big push of the show, the big crux, and this goes to what we're going to talk about tonight with Strange New Worlds, is they were using science, or what is believed to be good science, to solve problems. A problem would present itself in the first act of the show, and then there would be some confrontation of some sort, and then they would figure it out, and they would solve the problem and resolve the issue, and then they would move on to the next adventure. That was Star Trek.
Yeah, it's good at asking these sort of what if questions and then analyzing the possible answers to those to sort of reflect upon like humanity, like City on the Edge of Forever. The best episode of TOS is they've traveled back in time. They meet this nice woman. I forget exactly which Kirk or McCoy falls in love with her, and then I think Spock finds out that she's set in history to be hit by a car, and if she lives, the sort of ripple effect throughout history is the Nazis win World War II.
Right.
And, like nightmare future happens, but she's this completely innocent, lovely woman who does not deserve to die, and they can stop her from dying. What do you do?
Right. That was another element of Star Trek. It would ask these
Like
moral and ethical
problems. Moral dilemmas.
Moral and ethical, right. These moral and ethical questions, and you as the audience remember, like, what are they gonna that's a good one. What are they gonna do about that?
Yeah.
What a conundrum. And the audience, like I said, the audience really bought into it because these were interesting things. To the point where they would get away from this with the movies, which was what we lamented in any one of our reviews when we talked about this stuff, is that by the time we get to the Kelvin timeline, nobody remembers what made Star Trek appealing. They think it's just, banging aliens and phasers, and it's like, boy, have you missed the point here.
It's Star Trek written by people who don't get Star Trek. They're
right.
They're hired guns.
Which is why when we were reviewing the Orville, we were like, why is the Orville the best Star Trek on TV right now?
Yeah. That's actually funny because Wrath of Khan was also written by an author that didn't like Star Trek and is not interested in Star Trek still. But he understood the assignment and he did his homework.
Yes. Much like the guy who wrote Empire Strikes Back. So anyway, and so TNG was much the same. We talked about that. I think in one of our when we talked about Picard or something. I'm sure we brought this up. Where TNG was also, there's some action here. We don't want to bore people, but this is a lot of science fiction problem solving and moral dilemma and moral dilemma debates, which is great. And why people really, by the end of that series, people had fallen in love with TNG. And there's a giant debate over which is better, TOS or TNG. I think as you move on in this series, and we can wrap up here and move on to Strange New Worlds, I think Deep Space Nine retained some of that. The problem with Deep Space Nine was it lost the element of seeing new places and going on adventures because everything was on the fucking space station. So it was more like an office drama. Yeah,
Deep Space Nine was like, we need to try something different. And it had enough of sort of the good writers from TNG who sort of, they knew what they were doing. They knew the rules. So then, to the point where they knew how to break them. And like it didn't always work out, but it was kind of like, you're aiming for the moon and you miss, you end up among the stars sort of thing. Like it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. You talked about like, it's a Western in space, and Deep Space Nine always kind of reminded me of like the small Western town. You have a sheriff, you literally had a sheriff, and you had this, and you had a saloon, and it was always like people coming and going through the town, and some bad person would show up, and there'd be a duel in the middle of the street and some shit. Years later, when they started dealing with the Dominion War and the Klingon War before that, they kind of gave up on this is an old Western town in space motif, and just started like now it's a war show.
Yeah, but I think that the brilliance of that was like before the war, they sort of established the status quo. So when the war happens, you see how the war affects things. And that was, for the time, a very interesting direction to take Star Trek in. Is we've seen fights and like small scale space battles in Star Trek. We've never seen like an all out war.
It's
And
the
to sort
least Star Trek show of Star Trek, though, don't you think? I mean, and this is coming from a guy who's like a diehard Deep Space Nine fan. Like, at some point,
Yeah.
I actually would love to review those seasons, but I
Yeah.
still feel like it's the least Star Trek of Star Trek.
That is sort of a complaint I've heard leveled against Deep Space Nine. But then again, if you think Deep Space Nine, Star Trek, that isn't Star Trek. Discovery's, everyone's holding Discovery's beer.
Yeah, well,
like what if we just missed everything about what makes Star Trek and why people like Star Trek?
I have not
whereas-
watched Discovery, or as you call it, Star Trek shoot him in the fucking face.
Just about, yeah. But yeah, Deep Space Nine sort of decided to sort of take the sort of utopian vision of humanity that they had sort of evolved and sort of like, well, let's test it. Like, okay, here's all your high-minded ideas. Now people are dying. People are dying a lot. Now what do? You can't out-tech them. You can't negotiate them. There's no magic solution to this problem. You've got to go straight through this thing.
Right.
And you're going to have to make some pretty darn tough calls, and not all of them are going to be like nice things to do. And what happens when you have this utopian, peaceful society where everyone gets along, and you have to confront with that. And that was asking some big, pretty heavy questions. And I kind of give them props for doing it. They didn't do it because like, war's cool, man. Oh, look at this is so badass. Like, no, that was not the point. It was to test. To test this sort of ideology of Star Trek.
if you're hanging your hat on Star Trek X, just as Orville does, moral and ethical questions, and sure, Deep Space Nine is right in there. I think in some terms of the other things, the other legs on the stool that hold up Star Trek, it was missing those elements. Then you had Voyager, which was a poor man's Star Trek. I mean,
it was kind of
it got the point.
Yeah. My like quick take on Voyager is it was unfortunate that Voyager didn't come out now where we're used to long form, like sequential storytelling.
Right.
Because that was the initial pitch of Voyager is like, things get broken on the ship and they don't get fixed again. At some point, they might run out of photon torpedoes. They can't just stop at a starbase and resupply anymore. It's the ship off on its own, and they're going to have to make, again, tough decisions, based on survival where, like their moral values might not, gel with that. But because they said like, well, everyone's episode could be their first episode, so they always reset things before the next episode. So they really missed out on that premise. Whereas if you were to do that now as a streaming show, it would be perfect.
It would have been a good 10 episodes of how the fuck are we gonna survive? We are a ship lost at sea. We have no idea where our port is, and it's probably too far away, and we're gonna run out of supplies before we get there and die. Not bad. That's not a bad premise.
Oh, it's a great premise, but unfortunately they were never able to really execute to take full advantage of that premise. And there are some bright spots in Voyager. It has its good episodes, and like the Doctor character in 7 of 9, for example, were just some really of the best character work in Star Trek.
Yeah, like I said, I think Voyager suffers from its placement in TV, its placement in time, its budget. Like I said, there's an excellent premise there, but it is. I call it the poor man's Star Trek because it really was like, it was on like the UPN at the time, which for for you kids out there, that was like D-level television. That was the home of Homeboys from Space.
Yeah.
I never watched Enterprise. I have no idea if it's good, bad, or not.
Yeah, I've watched a bit of Enterprise, but I will admit it's probably the biggest hole in my Star Trek knowledge. And I think it was just kind of they're running out of ideas. Like that creative team had kind of you had 7 seasons of Next Generation, 7 seasons of Deep Space Nine, 7 seasons of Voyager. It's just, you only have so many good ideas in a writing team. And I'm not trying to be cruel here. It's just the facts is, you kind of, you've wrung all of what you have to work with out of the franchise, and you're stumbling around to figure out where do we go from here. And it just, it needed a break.
And it did. We did some stuff on film. We tried to reboot it, the films with the Kelvin timeline, which we've reviewed all 3 of those, and they are what they are. But that brought us to the modern era of Star Trek. Star Trek Shoot 'em in the fucking face, otherwise known as Discovery. We've reviewed every season of Star Trek Picard because I love David, and that one.
I think it was your idea at the start, but I think season 3 was.
Hang on, I was reviewing everything when we did Star Trek Picard.
Yeah. So
And then I-
don't
and then I was
blame
just
me on
wanting to
that
finish.
that one on me.
Yeah. Then I just wanted to finish it. Like, well,
Yeah.
let's finish what we. No, actually, that also nearly didn't survive the culling of my schedule. And then I had heard nothing but good things about Star Trek Picard 3, season 3, and I'm like, wow, we have to do this now.
Yeah, we did the first 2 seasons out of obligation, and they're like, yeah, nuts to this, and then oh wait, it's actually good now. So
yeah, Lower Decks was one where you twisted my arm, and you're like, come on, man.
Yeah. Well, I think you were implying that we should review Discovery, and friends don't let friends review Star Trek Discovery. So
right, and you pitched me Lower Decks, and I'm like, I don't want to watch this fucking Rick and Morty bullshit. And then 2 seasons of Lower Decks later, I was like, oh wait, this is really good.
Yeah.
So with that said, with that brief 25 minutes.
25 minutes in, we're actually going to start reviewing this thing. Welcome to the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, everyone.
Yeah, the TikTok has utterly destroyed this podcast.
Amongst many other things, but
yeah, true. So with that said, when we go back to what is Star Trek, what's the appeal of Star Trek? Science fiction, science to solve problems, moral and ethical dilemmas, a strong cast with good interdynamics that, fun viewing, a little bit of action, and and just a touch of sexiness. Strange New Worlds, David. Strange New Worlds season 1 follows Captain Christopher Pike and the crew of the Starship Enterprise in the 23rd century as they explore new worlds and carry out missions throughout the galaxy during the decade before Star Trek: The Original Series. So with that said, we've got our cast of characters here. We've got Anson Mount as Christopher Pike. You might remember Anson Mount as, or you might not, as Black Bolt from that terrible fucking Inhuman show.
Yeah, the Inhuman show. And Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
That's right. Ethan Peck as Spock, young Spock. Jess Bush as Christine Chapel. Christina Chong as Lan Yun Singh. And if that name sounds familiar, that is a relative of Khan. Celia Rose Gooding as Nyota Uhura. Melissa Navia as Erica Ortegas. And then Babs Ulusanmokin as Joseph Mbenga. And I think I got his name kind of right there.
Pretty close.
Let's see. And then we have Rebecca Romaine as Unachin Riley, or number 1. And then we have some reoccurring characters as well. So let's get into this show, David. Let's actually talk about it. It begins with Pike, who has had a vision of the future where he dies, and so he doesn't want to go back out there, but they need him to go back out there, and so he goes back out there. And he puts together his team, and we've got, of course, we have our second in command, who is a sassy, strong woman who don't need no man. Turns out she's some sort of alien who has enhanced herself, and enhancements are illegal in this era of Star Trek. So that's a problem. We've got our young Spock. We've got our doctor, whose daughter is terminally ill, and he's keeping her alive in the transporter, which we'll find out over the course of it. We've got our young, sassy helmsman who likes to crack wise and kick ass. We've got our stoic kick-ass broad who is the relative of Khan, and then we have young Uhura, who is like less than an ensign or some shit when the show starts.
Yeah, she's like a cadet, I think.
Yeah, and she doesn't quite know what she wants to be in this. She's not Uhura, the Uhura that we're going to meet 10 years from now. She's, this Uhura is not quite knowing whether or not she wants to be in Starfleet or not, and she's very much trying to find her way. She's young-eyed. She is wide-eyed and bushy-tailed. We have an alien engineer who is blind and, does
like Herschel, I think, or something is his name.
Yeah,
or
does like the autistic thing.
It is now.
Yeah. And then we have a sexy nurse on the ship who has a flirtation with Spock. So let us begin, David. What did you think overall of Strange New Worlds?
Like, my initial thought is, if this is what we had gotten instead of Discovery, things would have been a lot better in the fandom. It's not perfect by any means. It still has a ways to go to sort of get to the big brain Star Trek we all know and love, but it gets a solid A for effort. Like it's trying to do the right things and make the right decisions that I think Star Trek needs to go forward.
Strange New Worlds felt like if no one had if we had all gotten collective amnesia and didn't know there was ever Star Trek, and this was anyone's first Star Trek, this gets us close to the mark of what made TOS appealing to a general audience. Like, you could pitch Strange New Worlds as first Star Trek ever to somebody, and they go, "Oh, I get this. This is pretty cool. I like this." Like, it's not quite as heady or as intellectual as the Orville. It's shared commonality with the Orville is the use of everyday parlance, which kind of annoys me because this is a military vessel, a military explorative vessel, and that's always what killed me about the Orville too, is that everyone just sort of talks like we do now, and there's no sense of professionalism. It's everyone's like, hey, assholes in space. It's like, it's not.
Yeah, again, that was probably first 2 seasons of Orville. Third season, there was a lot less of that because Seth MacFarlane, I think, was just like, screw it, I'm just going to make my Star Trek show. I don't care what the network says anymore. Yeah,
well, it was on Hulu by that point. Nobody cared.
Yeah.
But Strange New World suffers from that as well, I think. There's a lot I like about the show. They're using science to solve problems. They have moral dilemmas, not quite as good as the Orville. Again, we don't have trans children. But there was definitely some interesting things going on in here. It also it leans a little too heavy on some modern tropes about, big, strong women who don't need no man. And I don't want to harp on that and make myself sound like the anti-woke guy or, the critical drinker light. But I do. God bless them. They at least don't tear down Pike in order to elevate women. They elevate
the male.
Go ahead.
Like to sort of give my very quick take on a lot of the gender representation, whatever you want to call it, is I don't have a problem with strong female characters.
Yeah.
And in science fiction, there's been a long history of strong female characters.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't have a problem with them adding more diverse characters. Again, look at the bridge of the original Star Trek, where you had a Japanese guy, a Russian guy, a black woman,
right.
All in technical, sophisticated professions, like
a Jewish.
Yeah.
That's a joke about our science fiction.
I know. I'm not going there, but but anyway, yeah. So I have no issue with that. But yeah, I when you have to tear one down to make another look better,
right?
That's where I have my issues. If you have a bumbling, where you have a movie where every man is stupid or evil or both.
Right.
And all the women are just super competent and good at everything. That's the point where I think a lot of people just go okay, this isn't, reality anymore. This is just, you're
okay. This isn't what I want to watch. So I'm not going to watch. Why aren't anyone watching? Because you insulted them. That's why.
Yeah. But here you have a starship and the command crew on the starship. They're all competent people.
Yeah. So this is going to sound like a really funny complaint, but everyone's competent.
Yeah.
I don't want them to tear down Pike. Don't get me wrong. And they don't. However, everyone's super competent and super awesome, and no one's bad at anything, and hardly anyone has any flaws. And that kind of bothered me about the show. There's a lot about the show I like. I'm not gonna spend the next 40 minutes just complaining about the show, I promise.
Yeah.
But one of the things I did not love about it was there didn't seem to be enough vulnerability in the cast. Everyone's kind of awesome at everything. And so it's well, how will the Avengers, win in this episode? I think the one that probably, weirdly enough, the one with the most growth and the one that seems the most vulnerable is Spock, which is weird because generally speaking, he's there sort of, for Kirk to bounce off of so that Kirk can go on this journey of discovery and learn and, and grow as a person.
Well, Spock is there to represent logical thinking. That was his goal. And you had McCoy representing emotional thinking and sort of Kirk try to navigate between the two.
Well, that was the thing. In terms of story structure and character arcs, this was, TOS was Kirk's show. And this was Kirk's journey, and Kirk was changed by the end of it. They don't really do that with Pike. Pike is kind of the same. I mean, other than he sort of, gets over, I'm probably going to die. He's not that different from the beginning of Strange New Worlds to the end of season 1. And the other thing about him is that he's a little too cool. He's
Yeah.
cooler than the other side of the pillow. Nothing like gosh, that scene with the pirates, or the bit with the pirates where, you know, he's just like, how about I cook for you and we talk about things. Like,
Yeah.
okay. Like I enjoyed it for its novelty. I disliked it for its lack of drama. He is unfucking phased by anything.
Yeah.
And
well,
so go ahead.
Like sort of one thing I think is, and I think this is sort of becoming a lost art in writing, is not everything has to conform to the mold of what, you know, quote unquote good writing is. This is not me promoting bad writing, but you know, this whole idea that, oh, you know, you need to have a 3-act structure and your character has to have a flaw at the beginning, and then you have your inciting incident, and then there's an obstacle, you know, to their goal, usually in the form of an antagonist, and through reaching their goal or overcoming the obstacle, they you know, correct the flaw in their character, and then we reach the end of our journey. I mean, nothing wrong with that. There's a reason why this is a common structure. It works,
right?
But at the same time, not everything has to be about that. You know, like you know, you like, I know, like you like the 3-act structure, like everything nice and neat and all in order, and then, like, you know, Quentin Tarantino comes along and he's like, screw that, I'm just shooting these scenes and putting them in whatever order I think is best, but it works.
Yeah.
Now, granted, not everyone can do that, and so,
and look, not every time you take a weird swing do you connect the ball and knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
Sometimes, look, when you take a weird swing and you crack the ball and hit a grand slam, everyone thinks, oh, it was the weird swing. Nope. yeah, happen to have gotten lucky that one time.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, the weird swings miss the ball. Yeah,
and like science fiction, character work hasn't always been its strongest suit. It's more been about the ideas of the story. Like, you know, Isaac Asimov, I, Robot. Like, what would the world be like if we had all manual labor performed by machines for pretty much free? What effect would that have on society? You go to make a movie of it, and it's just people shooting at killer robots because action, drama. You know, Asimov's protagonists are often just like scientists who are like, you know, the robots are being strange. How do we figure out what the problem is? But you know, in a film adaptation, it's like, well, now we have to go like, oh, his estranged daughter, and patching things together with his wife, and dealing with his inherent, you know, is, you know, like it's, you know, it's always this like very basic level human drama, which again is fine. It has its place, but you don't always need that to tell a good story. There are other things that people can get out of a story.
Look at Robert Heinlein's like Starship Troopers, the book versus fucking movie.
Yeah, the book is like space fascism is amazing, and then the movie space fascism is horrible.
Yeah,
it's like they're completely opposite takes on.
Right.
On
so I mean, you know, as I look at the cast, you know, the Doctor's got a lot of pathos going on. You know, he's trying to keep his daughter alive. He is trying to be the best doctor he can be, but he is clearly struggling. The problem is he kind of struggles through the entire series. They had the one episode where they go into the Nexus essentially, and the storybook comes to life, and it's that episode of Legends of Tomorrow where they keep reliving the same fucking day until they figure out, you know, what the problem is, and then it gets released from the magic.
Yeah, that was probably my least favorite episode of the season. Like it was fun to watch the actors having fun playing against type, like Anson Mount playing a buffoon instead of like calm and cool, you know, charismatic captain. You know, like it seemed like he was having a good time. But yeah, they totally like took that plot line for the Doctor and just threw it away.
Yeah,
it's like, nope, we're not doing that anymore. Problem solved without any effort from us at all. You know, which is funny because like probably one of my biggest issues here, and this is it's a nitpicky one, is just because like I've seen so much science fiction that you know all the tropes, like the episode where they're like trapped on the planet in the energy storm where the original race mysteriously disappeared, and there's these beings that we got to keep them out, they're going to kill us. It's like the energy beings are the original inhabitants of the planet. Like I figured that out before the opening credits rolled. Because I've seen the Omega Man, or I Am Legend, or the Last Man on Earth, whatever you want to call it. But Babylon 5, they had a spin-off where like a plague has been unleashed on Earth by bad aliens, and there's like one ship that's sort of like the most high-tech ship that they have access to, and it's basically going around the galaxy trying to find some like cure, like amongst alien races or natural phenomena, and it's this sort of ticking clock. And like, oh, okay, it's the same premise as the Doctor and his daughter. Like, I'm traveling around trying to find some piece of the solution to curing my daughter's disease, and like that could be interesting. Some episodes maybe he comes up with something, and other episodes, oh, that didn't work, and we're back to where we started again. And here's just like, nope, magic space alien in a nebula takes her into the Nexus, and now she's an adult and everything's good. Okay, so like,
and lobster.
Exactly. I all I can assume is that someone in the writer's room was like, yeah, we really don't actually know what to do with this anymore.
Going back to Spock, because I brought him up and then we ran away from him. Yeah. Spock, this is dealing when we meet Spock in TOS, he's more or less reconciled his human and Vulcan side. So this series, and this is probably one of the high points of it, it's one of the things I really liked actually, was this is early years Spock, where he acknowledges his human side, he acknowledges his Vulcan side. He's kind of the inherent racism of Vulcan against humans is still very much bothering him. And he is still trying to figure out how to reconcile the Vulcan and the human sides. What from each race, what from each culture is he going to keep, and what's he going to discard? What is Spock? What of these things makes him up? He has a fiance from Vulcan.
Yeah, to bring this doesn't end well. Spoiler alert! Don't get too attached.
Who gets a lot of play in the season. He also has a flirty relationship with the nurse character who is...
Yeah, they're doing Will They, Won't They with Spock and Nurse Chapel.
And it's an interesting choice, and actually one that I kind of like, because, there's a lot of like, I like Vulcans, they never lie, and you know where you stand with them, and he clearly has the hots for her, but he's also like Vulcan, so he can't have the hots for her. And
every 7 years that comes into question.
Sure. and she clearly has the hots for him, but he's like also an engaged guy, and this is still the Star Trek universe hasn't completely given itself to polyamory by this point, so we're still monogamous in the Star Trek universe.
Well, Gene Roddenberry would have been very supportive of that vision. So, he was not a one woman man.
No, he was polyamorous before that was a thing.
Yeah, well, I guess you could. That's one way of putting it.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, you're more the expert, but I think polyamory involves both members of the relationship being okay with it.
Okay with it, yes. Participatory, not necessarily. There are monopoly relationships. But anyway, no one came here to hear us debate that weekly. Yeah. Anyway, so it was nice to see Spock kind of in this sort of like love triangle with the nurse and Dupreen, and trying to reconcile his sides, and also being quintessentially Spock. But it's funny because, like, we talked about the relationship in TOS of Spock and Kirk. Spock and Pike don't have that relationship. They, he's doing his job. He's doing the best job that he can, and Pike relies on him to do his job, but he relies on everyone to do their jobs. Yeah. He doesn't quite have that bond with Spock that Kirk had with Spock. Which I think makes some degree of sense. They're not the friends that Kirk and Spock were. But he does appreciate his professionalism and competency, and and all of that. The other, I was going to say, Uhura probably has the nicest arc of anyone in the show. She comes on board and she's wide-eyed and naive, and she's unsure if she even wants to do this. And she's like, what value to the ship do I really have? And then along the way, she's like, I see the good in being here, and I want to be here, and I want to do the best thing that I can. This is a noble effort. We're engaged here. It's nice, So much of modern television tends to be nihilistic and negative and pessimistic, and here we have a character that's like, no, I believe in the service, and I want to do the best job I can in the service, and I think this is noble. Which is a nice thing to see in modern television, to recognize that being a part of a military operation is a good thing. Go figure.
Yeah, well, I mean, then we get into the whole issue of like, what exactly is Starfleet?
Yeah.
Because again, like Gene Roddenberry was very much Starfleet is not a military organization, but yet they also do have this military aspect to them, and yeah, it's that's a whole can of worms to dissect. But
let me tell you, the first day I started my job, and I work for a private company that provides services for the local sheriff's office, and the very first thing that came out of the trainer's mouth was, "We are a paramilitary institution."
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with Star Trek is a paramilitary institution.
Sure. Well, also, like on a ship, you kind of need hierarchy and organization for it to function. You can't just like, okay, everyone, just do whatever you want to do, and it'll work out.
Who's in charge here? Who the loudest one? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, was it Crimson Tide? Like they had this great line. Yeah, we are here to defend democracy, not practice it.
Right.
But
perfect.
Yeah, but like I'm not much of an expert on seafaring things, but like even on non-military ships, there is a chain of command. Captain, first mate, and all that kind of thing. Right. It's you need to know whose job is what and what the expectations are for them to do that job.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have oh gosh, let me find her. So you have Lan Yun Sing and her relationship with let me find her.
Is it Ortega?
No, Rebecca Romaine.
Oh, right, yeah.
Mm-hmm. They have a nice budding friendship because you have the one woman who's a superhuman, and enhanced human, and then you have an alien who's also enhanced, and they kind of bond over that, and they become friends, and they're looking out for each other. And as far as like friends go, they have a nice relationship that's captured. I mean, like I said, the writing is not necessarily all bad on Strange New Worlds.
No, it's not at all.
I'll tell you what, if someone were like, do you like Strange New Worlds or don't you? Like, what's your take on it? All of the stuff that isn't quintessentially Star Trek is done well. Yeah. The stuff that is quintessentially Star Trek, kind of a miss for me.
Yeah, it's okay. It's a lot better than it's been done before. They're a lot close. Yeah, they're at least hitting the target now. They're not getting a bullseye, but at least they're hitting a target, and they're not shooting the back wall of the archery range. I was
going to say they didn't hit a passing waitress.
Yeah,
in the face.
Yeah. It's like they're hitting the target with their bow and arrow. Discovery is like doing shot put because they just. It's like, we're not even doing the right sport here, guys.
Star Trek Discovery, would you like to play darts? Would I?
Yeah.
For those of you who are going to be listening to this in audio, I just shot a rocket at the dartboard.
Yeah, it's an original idea. We're subverting expectations.
That's kind of my take on it. The only episode I watched it. I tend to watch these things a week or two in advance of when I'm going to review them. So I try to keep them fresh in my brain, but because I gotta get these things done before we record, I tend to watch them a little earlier. Mm-hmm. And then by the time I get to recording, because I don't take notes and I want to go from memory and have it be a more visceral experience. Just like what am I feeling? What am I remembering? What am I thinking about? And the only episode that really jumps out at me is the one where is the one with the pirates, where half the crew ends up on the pirate ship and they get out of it by causing a mutiny. And Spock is on the ship with the lead pirate gal who ended up being a turncoat.
Yeah. And
they do the bit with Dupreen where Spock's like, yeah, I'm cheating on you. And he kisses the nurse. And I'll tell you, Star Trek, not known for be from TOS all the way to Discovery, not known for its sex appeal. It's just not. Yeah. There's some sexiness hither and thither. Don't get me wrong. But like I cannot think of many instances where there was such hot on-screen chemistry where I was like, hubba, hubba, Yeah. And when Spock kisses the nurse, whose name escapes me,
Chapel is the character's name.
Yeah, Jess Bush. First of all, Jess Bush, Australian actor, model, and visual artist, and hotsy totsy. Holy cow. She is an attractive woman, in my opinion.
Yep. Well, I mean, the actress that plays Dupreen, she's pretty good too.
She is. But I am a big fan of on-screen sexual chemistry.
Yeah.
And when when he kissed her, like you could see, like I call it the vapors. You could see like sex just emanating off these two. And like sometimes you capture lightning in a bottle and you don't even mean to. Like I don't know if anyone purposely put those two together and like, yeah, these two. Watch what happens when we mush them together. But whether it was done purposefully or completely by accident, they created a moment. And I'll tell you, it's my favorite episode. It's the best episode of season 1. And then the other thing about it, because I complained about the parlance and the use of modern language, and it's kind of the way they speak to each other bothers me. This one didn't. She's a ne'er-do-well. She's a shitty person, and if she still talks like an asshole in the 20th century, I'll go. I'm 21st century. I'm fine with it. It's fine. I'll allow a certain amount of asshole acting, behavior, language from some characters, just not the ones in the fucking military. And so some of her monologue there at the end and the way she deals with Spock and some of her sarcasm, a little too cute by half, but I'll allow it because it was one of the more amusing things in that episode. And then, like I said, the stuff with Spock basically like, it's so funny because like whenever a guy's like, I'm cheating on my woman, they're always so slimy and shitty about it. And, you want to punch him in the face or cheer him, depending on what kind of an asshole you are.
Yeah.
And Spock, not known for emoting, but the way he talks to Dupreen, because he's trying to get her to buy that this is bullshit.
Yeah.
Like he absolutely good props to Ethan Peck.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Props to Ethan Peck, man. He, for all his Spockiness, captured the very essence of that slimy, shitty behavior. Like by the end of it, I felt like I'd been watching Minnie Driver, Robin Williams, Matt Damon, Good Will Hunting. Where where that scene where Matt Damon's fucking laying into her because he needs to sabotage this relationship something quick. And so he's like telling her that she's a shit human being and tells her to fuck off. I remember being in the theater with my friend Tom and we're going, like, we're like sad for her. We're like, oh no, like we love you, Minnie. Like we'll come to you. Like, that's how I felt in that scene. And it's with these two robots.
Yeah,
talking to each other. It's good shit. It's some of the best writing in the series. So I'm going to throw it to you for last words, final comments, anything else you want to talk about.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Going back to when they were doing like the initial PR push for Discovery, it was all like, this is going to be 10 years before the events of the original series. There's not going to be any Enterprise. There's not going to be any Spock. This is going to be its own ship, its own crew. We're going to focus on. And then you got to the season finale of Star Trek and say, we're getting a distress call from another vessel. And you just see it on the computer screen, vessel registration NCC 170. And then, the Enterprise sails up to the Discovery. And it's like, well, that didn't last very long. It's kind of like, if things continue to go bad for Marvel, they'll eventually just like start flying aircraft over Robert Downey Jr.'s house and dropping big pallets of cash until he agrees to come back and be Iron Man again.
Right.
But yeah, it's like, they're just like, in case of glass, of emergency, break glass for bringing back, TOS member berries.
Right.
And then they had, Pike go on to be the guest captain for season 2 of Discovery, and they were like hunting after Spock, and it was just like halfway through season 2 of Discovery, I just gave up. I'm like, I don't care about the show anymore. I'm, why support this thing that seems to be really bad? I'll wait and see if there are any good reviews, like what happened with Picard season 3. I'm still waiting, but anyway, but Anson Mount and Ethan Peck's performances were just so good that characters love those characters who actually, acted like they were in Star Trek, for example.
Yes.
That was kind of like the sort of the main impetus of this show, I think, was just like, hey, like people really like these guys, and we should kind of like try and do a bit more classically oriented Star Trek, where it's like one story in an episode, and we can try different things and see what works and what doesn't. Go with an ensemble cast instead of having one character that the whole universe revolves around.
Star Trek, known for its wacky aliens. One episode with wacky aliens, one. And it was the bit where it was like the Guardians of the Flame or whatever the fuck they were called.
Yeah, with like the egg that they sing to. Yeah, that was
that was the
Yeah,
most
that was an okay
science fiction wacky Star Trek stuff I'd seen the whole season. Because like the rest of it, I didn't think they did anything really out of the box. It's like, it was all right.
Yeah. So yeah, this is kind of a let's try and right the ship a bit. I think was the idea. Let's do a bit more. I mean, it's still going to be like a new show with new characters, sort of, but yeah, doing more. Yeah, sort of more in the classical vein of Star Trek, and like again, it's missing the big idea science fiction ideas. Like the one episode where they go to the planet where like they sacrifice a kid to a machine every generation and that solves all their social problems. But it's just like, at the end, Pike's like, well, I don't like that, so I'm going now. Bye. It's like, well, wait, like this would have been something that you would have like found out about like before the halfway point of the episode, and then it would have been like the moral question of, like, is it worth sacrificing one kid for the benefit of an entire civilization?
Right. That was the whole like thing with the whatever they're called in Orville and the trans kid. It's like
the Mocklins,
well, if we fuck with the Mocklins, that's where like half our military weapons come from, so we can't. And they were like, okay, but is the the life and happiness of this kid worth the fucking weapons? Like, that was the question.
Yeah. And
it was an interesting one, and I remember you, Jesse, and I like having a serious debate about that. To the point where people ask me, give me some shows that are like quintessential Radulich and Broadcasting Network, like deep think, reviews, and I'm like, our one on the Orville season 3, that's up there.
I'm glad that they didn't ask for shows where there's just lots of disagreement, because then they would have gotten like Transformers 4 and Deadpool.
I sent her the Transformers 4 one because I was like, hey, would you like to hear what Robert and I sound like when we're trying to kill one another? Age of Extinction. She actually liked it. It's funny.
Yeah.
But anyway,
okay.
Yeah, you're right. So like, there's some television right now is such a funny thing because some of it's written so well. It's like, oh my god, clearly there's some great talent in Hollywood. Clearly some great ideas, and then there's other stuff where you're just like, you just don't have any faith in your audience. And
yeah.
Strange New World is not the worst written show I've ever seen. It's not the best written show I've ever seen. It is solidly in the middle.
Yeah, it's middle, but like maybe I'm just like a battered fan at this point. The middle is better. Like, it's like
okay. I have like almost like the perfect analogy for this.
Sure.
So I've talked about how like Halo fucking broke me. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I can't do the morass. I can't do the sludge. So I hand it off to Alexis, and so she does the Marvel and and whatever, and she kind of takes a leap of faith with a lot of the big IP stuff that I just can't do anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I stick to things like David Simon and The Idol.
Yeah.
I have to do the high.
Pretty big gap there.
So what did I just do? I did something real recently that kind of I know Show Me a Hero, but that was part of the David Simon stuff. Maybe that was it. Anyway, I cannot remember what the hell I did now. It doesn't matter. Yeah, The Idol and David Simon. That's my shit. My point being, like, I walked away from Halo and I was sorry I had a podcast. Oh, Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
Ted Lasso.
Yeah, there's one more. Yeah.
I got the Black Mirror coming up, Legend of Vox Machina, Good Omens, Machina, yeah. Good Omens, etc. My point being that I don't want to review stuff I don't want to review anymore. I just don't.
Yeah.
I can't do something just for the sake of content.
Yeah.
I don't hate that we took an hour of our lives away from our families to talk about Strange New Worlds. This, I think, was worth having an hour with my friend to just bullshit about Star Trek. That's pretty much like my selling pitch for anyone who wants to watch Strange New World. I'm like, it's good. Not the best thing. It's not the worst thing.
Yeah.
It ain't half good. Hey, Star Trek New Worlds. It ain't half bad. Yeah, but it ain't half good neither.
Yeah. It has not hit the peaks of Golden Age Star Trek, but it also hasn't hit the valleys of Golden Age Star Trek. No one has had sex with a ghost yet, as far as we know. So that was a real episode. No one's been hyper evolved into a salamander. Though speaking of salamanders, setting up the Gorn as the big bad's not a bad idea.
Why'd you say that? I actually that was kind of. I mean, other than the Gorn is an old Star Trek villain alien.
Yeah,
race.
it's
I
like
didn't know what the big deal was.
for those of you that have seen the thing of like Captain Kirk fighting the Lizard Man, that's a Gorn.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but them just using like, okay, well, let's make them now this sort of more mysterious race that basically they're like the aliens from Aliens now. And,
Okay.
like it's not a bad idea. I mean, yeah, it's like, okay, here's our big bad alien race, and we know it's going to work out in the end because I think the Gorn are part of the Federation by Next Generation or something like that. But it's not a bad thing to like sort of have for your antagonist. I like that they have like Noonien Singh, like her colony was wiped out by the Gorn, so she sort of has this sort of PTSD vengeance arc with them.
I do
good
like
idea.
I do like that they drew from the Khan superhumans. It's like, hey, we're not all Khan, okay? Like, yes, we're enhanced, and we know that there's like racism against enhancement now because of that. But Jesus Christ, we're not all bad. Like, we're still people. I do like that sort of humanist approach to this era of Star Trek. Of, hey, just because we're a thing doesn't mean all things are bad.
Yeah. Yeah, like they do a pretty good job of giving most of the characters something to do. It might not be like a deep emotional arc, but at least they have some sort of angle that they're working on that can sort of progress through the show.
The blind engineer in Uhura trying to fix something was for God, I have been there.
I was so upset when they killed him off. That was just what a great character, though I never understood how he could read the displays.
Hey, magic. I just like that you're trying to get someone. Look, I have children, and I can tell you, I have reached that level of frustration with somebody trying to give them simple tasks.
Yeah,
there's a lot. There's a lot of when I'm training people, and I'm having them go through medical records or electronic.
Very solid cast. There's some some good story ideas in here. Again, like I wish they could kind of get a bit more of this sort of big idea stuff in. Again, a lot of the times when they try and delve more into the deep sci-fi stuff, it gets kind of silly. Like you can sort of tell that it's not their strongest point of the writing staff, but I see them making a good, honest effort, and like I hope that the show gets better going forward, and we'll find a part of the answer to that question when we do season 2. But yeah, it's good. And as a ship nerd, like the sets look great. Everything's not too over designed. I love that you like inside Pike's quarters, you see like structural beams and bulkheads sort of going through it. It feels a lot more like a ship than just a hotel in space. Which is kind of like my biggest complaint about the Enterprise D's design is it's a flying Ramada Inn in space full of scientists.
Yeah,
but
I was actually going to bring that up.
I
was going to bring that up. I think TNG actually had like science. What do you call it? Oh God, I don't have words tonight. There were experts. There were like science experts that were on set to help with the writing, and like they would write scripts, and they were like science cook, and then they would actually give it to like a scientist like to write something that made some degree of sense.
Yeah, some degree of sense. Again, it's pretty iffy, but they put in some effort to try and come up with, for the time, somewhat plausible explanations for how things work and what's going on. It's certainly compared to Star Wars, where it's just magic or a crystal or something, which is fine. Like, you don't watch Star Wars for
the fucking wizard did it in most cases.
Pretty much. But that works with Star Wars. How the technology works is not that important to Star Wars and what it does. And I love Star Wars in its own way. But yeah, like I thought like a lot of the tech, the updating design of the tech and everything looks really good. I really like the look of the Enterprise in this. I think it's like a really good job of sort of like, here's sort of a higher resolution version of the original Enterprise. And it's just nice. It feels honoring the look of the original whilst updating it for like modern technology and budgets. And really, I think my final sort of big criticism of the show, outside of, again, I wish they could kind of just kick it up to that level just a bit more, is I just really wish that they would set this in like a post Nemesis timeline. It makes it so much easier to have to worry about why does everything look so much better than it did in the original series, because it's not the 60s and they have money now. But like there are those people who are like, no, it has to look like the original series because that's what things look like. Damn it! And, okay, like you do you. But I just sort of think that it solves a lot of the issues with continuity and those issues. Like just like have these same actors playing similar characters. Maybe they change the names around. Instead of Captain Pike, it's like Captain Charisma McAwesome Sauce or whatever.
Charisma McAwesome Sauce.
I made that up. But yeah, and just kind of if I can discover like they made the Klingons completely different from the Klingons. Well, make yourself a new race, and then you can do whatever you want with them, and people won't complain.
Yeah,
I mean, and like the show's not terrible because of the time period it's set in the Star Trek universe. It's just I kind of think that it's a lot more freeing to be beyond all that continuity because it's like you say, like I can't get too invested in the Spock to Prin romance because I know that doesn't end well.
See, I don't. But
yeah,
but
like the episode Amok Time, like where Kirk fights Spock to the death. That's like T'Pring setting up Spock so that she can basically get the engagement annulled so she can go off with some other guy. Like, this isn't gonna work. like the Pike knowing what's going to happen to him and not beyond that he's going to have this horrible accident that will disfigure him and he'll live in suffering in this chair, but he has to do it for the greater good.
The greater good.
Thank you. Like that's an interesting aspect of the character where they do use forward continuity as something that enriches the story. But yeah, so that's kind of like my sort of like if I had done the show, the things I would have tried to do a bit better with the more sciencey moral stuff, and maybe set it more in the future.
So the buzz on this that I've heard, I mean, I've heard some stuff on the Critical Drinkers channel. They don't love it, but I get the sense that these
you don't
guys
have to agree with the Critical Drinker on everything, or anyone for that matter.
Well, yes, I know. I said that on Indiana Jones.
Yes, I wasn't necessarily speaking to you directly, Mark. It's like internet. Hello.
Well, here's I'm bringing this up because there seems to be like a doth protest too much kind of a thing going on with the Drinker and his crew, because he has his channel where he posts his video essays, and then he has the Drinkers Chase,
the after hours or Drinkers Chasers,
where he does what we're doing. He does a StreamYard podcast with 5 other guys, or 4 other guys and a dog, and there's always like, we're not racist, we just don't like this show. And it's like, okay, when you've said it 10 times about every fucking diverse cast, I'm starting to think you're full of shit. And it's like I feel like they were like highly critical of Strange New Worlds. Now, granted, they're talking about season 2, and we haven't gotten there yet. We're like a year behind.
Yeah, I have not seen season 2 yet, so I cannot comment on.
I've heard it gets way silly, and I know they're reacting to that, but I feel like the buzz on this show when it first came out, and we missed that window to talk about it and be relevant, but I'm going to bring it up now anyway, was that it kind of close to what we're saying.
A good podcast is timeless.
Sure. I think the buzz on this, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because I'm curious to know if you knew anything about this, was that it was kind of like what we were saying about the show. Feels like it's in the world of Star Trek, but doesn't get everything right. It is right there in the middle. It is a McDonald's cheeseburger of Star Trek shows. It's fine. It's fine. It's not great. It's not terrible.
Yeah. But it's also not like a sketchy burger from like a condemned diner, which is kind of what we've been mostly getting.
Right.
Till now.
When I hear the Drinkers guys like complaining about it, it's like you're not even acknowledging, it feels like, well, this isn't my Star Trek where it mostly focuses on the white guys. I don't know what you want.
I don't watch those streams, so
it's the Year of Our Lord 2023. It's okay, not everything has to be that.
Yeah, I used to watch a bit more Midnight's Edge. That's the closest thing I compare to. And like sometimes it's like, okay, yeah, those are good points, and then other times like, you're just bitching that there are women here. Like, really, that's it. And
you
didn't. It's either there are women here, or you didn't write my fan fiction, therefore it sucks.
Yeah, I like a lot of the Midnight's Edge stuff, but there are definitely times where I'm just like, you're chumming the waters here, pal. And
Most of their
see you.
industry predictions seem to be completely false. Like the only accurate thing they ever say in their predictions is take this with a huge grain of salt because it's all based on rumor and conjecture.
Yeah, and and whatever Doomcock's coming out of the woodwork with. All right.
Yeah.
With that said, and now that we've said Doomcock, that's the phrase that pays. So that brings us to our conclusion of Star Trek: Strange New Worlds review. We'll be back in a few weeks. Let's see, when are we doing Strange New Worlds again?
I think it's like late October, 24th, I think.
And when I can fit you in. Yeah, October 24th. October 24th. So we'll be back in 2 months to look at season 2 of Strange New Worlds, and we'll keep going with this because I like David. Like hanging out with David.
Yeah, I mean, unless like season 2 is really bad. Yeah.
Tell you what, motherfucker. You used to be you. You got balls now, man. I toughened you up. I'm gonna take credit for this because you came on this podcast waiting for people to stop talking, and we don't. And you did your little dig when my daughter was on the show. It's like everyone has to fight for time here, and now here we are. I had to stop talking because you were just like, no, I'm David Wright. I have shit to say. Good for you.
I got to get through my list of points before the end of the podcast.
Right? Like, don't tell your fucking story about work. No one cares. I
never said that.
You were saying it with your words, just different words. But no, I'm giving you shit, but I'm giving you shit because I'm giving you credit, man. You have come a long way from the first podcast. So I fancy you, David, right? All right. So unless they fucking kick it to next year because of the fucking strike, David will be back in November. Well, he'll be back in October for this. But he'll be back in November for Dune Part 2. And
please, Hollywood, please do not move Dune. I can't do this again. Like, you moved Dune 1 twice. Like, just let me have my Dune, okay?
Yeah, no shit. And then we'll do Disenchantment Part 5. Yeah. January 29th.
We'll wrap that up with a nice little bow.
Yep. So that's when David's coming on. Yeah, yesterday was Damn You Hollywood, and you're like, wait, and that's supposed to be tonight? I decided to move it to Mondays. Fucking sue me. So we did Blue Beetle last night. Thursday, myself and Pat Mullen will be looking at the 4 Manny Pacquiao versus Manuel Marquez fights. Friday, we've got movies that don't suck and some that do. They're looking at Happiness for Beginners and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. Saturday is Everyone Loves a Bad Guy Saturday. We're looking at Christopher Lee. And then Sunday is Metal Hammer of Doom Sundays. We're looking at Ens Ferrum. And then Monday, myself, Pat Mullen, Jason Teasley, and possibly the dude that was on the Twisted Metal show will be reviewing Gran Turismo. And then TV Party is back. It'll be myself and Alexis Haina, she who does the morass and he who does the hoity-toity. We're going to combine our efforts, and we're going to compare and contrast. It'll be the first time ever on TV Party. Dope Sick and Painkiller, which were both about Purdue Pharma's OxyContin product and the opioid crisis that we are presently in and all the people that it killed. So we're going to look at those 2 shows and compare and contrast them next week on TV Party. And a good time will be had by all. David Wright, any last words, sir?
Well, I guess no. But,
you can just say no.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm starting Ashoka tonight. I think it starts, so I'll probably be back for that too.
Which one? Oh,
Ashoka.
Yeah, I haven't decided if I'm going to try to make myself available for that yet. I'm going to watch it. I'm probably going to watch it contemporaneously because I like the character, and I've become a huge fan of Rosario Dawson, and anything she is in, I will watch. She's pretty amazing. Yeah. I'm still burned by fucking Obi-Wan Kenobi. You were on that show. That was...
Yeah.
I tell you what, Halo broke me, and Obi-Wan Kenobi swept what was left of me into a bin and dumped it in the garbage. After that, I'm fucking done. I could not do this anymore. But I'm gonna give Ahsoka a chance. I may not talk about it, but I will at least watch the show.
Yeah, it's a Filoni Favreau production, so I'm a bit more optimistic. They have a pretty good track record.
Okay, as long as she doesn't throw a mountain at anyone, I'll be all right. And with that said, folks, thanks for joining us here on TV Party tonight. For David Wright, I'm Mark Radulich. Be well, be safe, and behave.